Welcome, everybody, to the Gruely True Sports Special March Madness edition. We are looking today at double-digit seeds. I do have one as a 7 seed that could possibly make a run to the Sweet 16. Last year, we saw multiple teams do that, including the Princeton Tigers, and the list goes on and on every year. And it seems like ever since the NIL and the transfer portal, more and more teams have more of an even playing field and have a chance to advance. And we're going to start off with the one team on there that's not a double-digit seed. And that team would be the Dayton Flyers. The Dayton Flyers are a team I watched growing up. Don Donaher back in the 1970s, into the 80s. You remember Roosevelt Chapman took them to the Elite Eight in 1984. They played the national championship game in the late 60s, falling short to UCLA. And they are a very well-coached team. 2020, the season that was destroyed by COVID, I think the Dayton Flyers were the best team in the country. Anthony Grant has done an outstanding job there. And it almost seems too easy to include this team. But the Dayton Flyers, I think, are big time underseeded at 7. I think they should have been a 5. I mean, this is a very good team. They were ranked in the top 25 almost all season long. And the road won't be smooth. They're going to play Nevada, who's coached by Steve Alford. That's a team that won 25 or more games this year. Nevada, I think, is underseeded too. I think Nevada should probably be about an 8. I think Dayton should be a 5 or a 6. And actually, Dayton is a 1.5-point favorite in this game. But Dayton's run here is not going to be smooth because you may have to play Arizona in the second round. But the thing that I really like about the Dayton Flyers here is you look at their season. They lost early in the season to Northwestern by 5. That was when Northwestern had Ty Berry. Everybody was healthy. Then they went on to beat LSU by 3 points. They beat St. John's. They lost to Houston 69-55, basically the number 1 or 2 team in the country, according to who you talk to. But then, you get a win over SMU at SMU, which was a solid win. You beat Cincinnati 82-68 in the city of Cincinnati, even though it's considered a neutral court game. So the question is, when you bet this, where do you bet it at? I think the best place to bet this, if you want to bet Dayton to go to the Sweet 16, is on BetMGM. BetMGM is the top sports book for betting on college basketball. Make sure you check them out. Of course, Dayton's issue will be that second round game against Arizona is going to be tough, but Arizona did finish the season 2-4. I think the Dayton Flyers are a definite threat to make a run to the Sweet 16, maybe even farther, because I think Anthony Grant is one of the best college basketball coaches in the country. All right, let's move on. Our team number 2 are the James Madison Dukes. James Madison is a team that I think with 31-3 this season. James Madison is extremely good also. And when you look at them, the thing that stands out to me with James Madison is just the simple fact that when you watch them play, they should not be a 12 seed either. They're only a 4.5-point underdog to the Wisconsin Badgers. The Big Ten was down this year. Wisconsin's a team that looked like a 1 or a 2 seed up until early January. Then they went kind of into crapper. They even lost to the Indiana Hoosiers a couple weeks ago by 4 points at Assembly Hall. They got on a run in the Big Ten tournament, came up short against Illinois, but you got to ask yourself, which team is the real team here? All right. Now, James Madison faces a Wisconsin team that can shoot. But Wisconsin defensively, this is not your typical Badgers team. Defensively, Wisconsin really struggles, and they don't defend well. James Madison has a lot of depth here. They have experience. They are efficient on both ends of the floor. And I think this program has as good a chance as any mid-major to mount a major upset run and possibly even end up in the Final Four. James Madison is a solid basketball team. And I really think that this sets up for them to give them a really good chance. I think they're going to beat Wisconsin. I wouldn't even give the 4.5 points here if I was going, or take the 4.5 points if I was going to bet MGM. I would bet them straight up to win the game because this is a game where I think James Madison is the better team. That's simple. I mean, they're just the better team. And James Madison, like I said, I would bet the numbers to get to the Sweet 16. Right now, it's plus 600 to get to the Sweet 16. Now, they could face Duke in the second round, but this is not Duke with Mike Krzyzewski of old. This is a Duke team that I think could have a little bit of trouble even against the Catamounts from Vermont in the first round. And James Madison then in the Sweet 16 would play Houston. I think they match up very well with the Houston Cougars. That's a possible Sweet 16 matchup. So that makes that even more intriguing to me. What if you bet them to go to the Final Four? Last year, we saw two mid majors make the Final Four, even though I don't think the Mountain West really counts as a mid major anymore. But there's a lot of things here that point towards a James Madison run. And the biggest thing to me is the fact that they're playing Wisconsin. I would bet that game all day long, guys. Wisconsin, I don't think is going to beat them. Next up, you've got the University of Alabama Birmingham Blazers. We got Robert Stewart on from Vero Beach. How you doing, Robert? Great to have you on the show as always. What do you think, Robert? Give me your picks. Who's your upset picks? Anybody out there? Make sure you chime in. Leave a description of what you think is the mid-major teams that could make it to the Sweet 16. I know as I went to Indiana State, I'm still a little butthurt that the Indiana State Sycamores aren't there, but it happens. UAB is a program that started back, mid-late 70s. If you remember Gene Bartow, the former coach at UCLA, the man who succeeded John Wooden, he actually took UAB to the Sweet 16 in 1981 against Indiana, got him to the Elite Eight also a couple years later, upset Indiana in the tournament also in 1982 in the second round. This UAB team is extremely interesting to me because this is a team that I really hadn't seen much of until this past weekend. Now, they had a smooth pass to winning the AAC championship. They manhandled Wichita State, South Florida, and Temple, all by double-digit margins on the way. The South Florida game was really impressive. I think South Florida is a solid team. They're 9-3 in their last 12 games. They've had impressive victories against Drake, Florida Atlantic, Memphis. And, I mean, I think they stand as a huge Sweet 16 contender because Drake and Florida Atlantic are very good teams. Florida Atlantic, of course, was in the Final Four last year. But you get the Vasquez kid and the Lindenborg kid. They've both been stellar contributors on this Rams team. They score well. They draw a lot of fouls. They crash the boards. They're physical. And both players are key drivers behind this team's success. Now, Andy Kennedy has done a great job with this team. He comes from a winning pedigree. So an upset against San Diego State in this first round game, which made the national championship game last year, shouldn't be out of the question right now. National title odds, so you know, on UAB are plus 50,000. Now, a second round matchup does concern me against Auburn, but I think UAB, in the way they can slow the game down and the way they play defense, could give an Auburn team that has been inconsistent this year, they could give them troubles. And if they do, like I said, Auburn's inconsistency here, they're playing another team in Alabama, UAB versus Auburn. I think UAB could be a definite scary situation for Auburn in the second round. They may not think it is, but once this game, Robert chiming in, he says, I agree on James Madison. Does that mean I'm wrong, Robert? I'm just kidding. But you did pick IU every game this year, and I don't think they went undefeated. But once again, it's Indiana. Things happen. Indiana will be back next year, though, right, Robert? I bet Robert will predict them right now to win the national championship. So as we move on here, the next team on my list are the Drake Bulldogs. I've already talked about Drake a little bit, just when I brought up Indiana State. I think Drake is way underseeded at a number 10. The Drake Bulldogs are a very good basketball team. They beat Indiana State in the Missouri Valley Conference Championship game, and they beat Indiana State at home. They also lost to Indiana State away at Holman Center. But the Bulldogs' Missouri Valley Conference Championship win earned them an automatic bid. They're a 10 seed. I think this is the third straight year they've been in the tournament. The big thing about here is the DeVries guy. DeVries and this Bulldog offense has been unstoppable for most of the season. DeVries scores 21.7 points per game. He shot an impressive, I think it was like 36, 37% from the three-point line. They make their free throws. They are a very well-coached team, and Drake will need to maximize limited possessions for success in the matchup against the Washington State Cougars. Washington State is a solid team, but Washington State also has a tendency to be a little inconsistent. In the second round, they'll play Iowa State. So you got another battle of Iowa. You got Iowa State versus Drake. The big thing about Iowa State, the non-conference schedule is not very good. But in the conference tournament, Iowa State turned it up big time. They ran through the conference tournament, blew out the Houston Cougars, who are the number 2 ranked team in this field. The question here is, how much does that take out of a team? We know in past situations, when you get something like that, a lot of times that team comes out, they flame out in the first or second round just because it took so much energy to win in the first round of the tournament or to win their conference tournament. They don't have a lot left when you get to the into the March Madness tournament. So I think Drake here is a very smart, well-coached basketball team, and the Indiana State Sycamore should be in this tournament. Actually, I think Drake should probably be a 7 seed. I think Indiana State should be a 9 seed, and Tom Izzo and Michigan State shouldn't be even involved in this tournament. So, and yes, Robert said that he agrees the Indiana Hoosiers will win the national championship. I just hope that Robert's in a state where smoking marijuana is legal, because I hope you're right, Robert, but it doesn't look good right now. Let's just put it that way. All right, next up, we got the College of Charleston. The College of Charleston in the past has made noise. Anytime their conference, the CAA, is mentioned, usually Charleston is the team that's brought up. And Charleston's a good basketball team. And they are a 13 seed right now. They're a 10.5-point underdog against Alabama. Alabama is extremely good. But as I said, when the Cougars kicked off March Madness early, that victory, 82-79 against Stony Brook in an overtime thriller to get to this tournament, Charleston's a school that has given teams trouble in the past at March Madness. And Charleston's hot shooting, led by Rain Smith of Australia, has proved too much for 12 consecutive opponents, 14 of their last 15, 23 out of 26 overall. The College of Charleston is a red-hot team. Alabama has not been red-hot. Alabama is a team that is 2-4 over their last 6 games. They have not finished this season well. Now, the odds for Charleston to make the Sweet 16 are plus 1,400. They've won 12 straight. And remember this, Charleston can shoot the ball. Alabama is poor defensively. You combine those two. Pat Kelsey, former Xavier assistant coach, and his staff have a team that plays well on both ends of the floor. I think this is a more rounded team than Alabama. I think the issue here is that Alabama is Alabama. They're probably more talented physically, but Charleston has a team that's well-coached, well-rounded. I think Charleston can make a run here at the plus 1,400. Next up, I've got Samford. Not Sanford Son, we've got Samford. That is actually a team. I actually had a couple people ask me about that before. Nobody had heard of them. But Samford is dangerous. And when you look at Samford here, possibly to the Sweet 16, we've seen crazier things happen in the past than a team like Samford getting in. And, Bucky McMillan's Samford team earned 30 victories this season. Anytime a team wins 30 games, that means you're winning most of your conference games too. It's hard in any conference to win tournament games. They stand a good chance to make an unlikely run here. They're 7.5-point underdogs against Kansas. Now, Kansas is missing a couple big-time players like Hunter Dickinson. Will he be back? Will McKellar be back? That's a big question here, because we watched Kansas get absolutely annihilated by the Houston Cougars in Houston at the end of the season. They followed that up in the Big 12 tournament by losing 72-52 to an average Cincinnati Bearcat team. They've only been 1-4 in their last 5 contests. They only scored 46 points against Houston. And the question is, even if all those guys were to be back, how ready are they going to be to play? It's been a few weeks. So a second-round matchup here would be against Gonzaga or McNeese State. I could see McNeese State beating Gonzaga. If they do, really, McNeese could be on this list too, because I think McNeese versus Samford is a high possibility of happening. I think Samford, if we see the Kansas team that played the last 2 weeks, Samford's going to beat them. And McNeese matches up well against Gonzaga. So I think there's a chance at an upset in that game also, which is why I'm going to put Samford up here. I put them up as the 13th seed because we're trying to get double-digit seeds. And that's what we've got. So to go back and go through this, we've got James Madison, Alabama, Birmingham, Drake, Charleston, Samford, and the Dayton Flyers. Of course, Dayton, I know before anybody says anything, is a 7th seed. But I think the Flyers are a team that gets highly overlooked almost every year. And once again, I think 2020, they would have won a national championship. We'll never know that because the season was canceled. And I would also like to talk about the Drake Bulldogs. I think when you look at this, there are a couple teams here that could possibly make a Final Four run. And the two that really stand out to me are the Drake Bulldogs and James Madison. So I would really keep an eye out on those two teams. I don't know why that says Dan Kornhauser in the corner, but make sure you check out Feeling the Draft with Dan Kornhauser. That show will be posted on YouTube shortly. I want to remind everybody that you also could go check out the BetMGM link. If you're watching on YouTube, click on the link in the description down below. Make sure you share this video. We're not ESPN, so we're not kissing anybody's butt. We're just telling the truth of what we see. Make sure you follow me, Mike Goodpaster, at Grilling Truth. But for now, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been watching and listening to The Grilling Truth, where the legends speak.